So, the Steam Deck has been out for a long time now, and that means there's a ton of different things you can buy to mod your own deck. I've done quite a few modifications and have a few I recommend, and a few that might be worth it for the expert modder. Let's dive into it. So, to start off, operating system. The SteamOS has been updated since its launch, and it has added tons of new features and different games that you can play on the Steam Deck. This has only been getting better, and the library of tested games has been getting better as well. What I mean by this is the whole Steam Deck catalog is actually able to be updated by the user now. So when you played a game for over a certain number of hours, the Steam Deck will actually ask you, hey, do you think this is a recommended title for the Steam Deck? Or do you think it plays, but maybe there's some weird text somewhere and it's not quite up to snuff? It'll actually poll multiple people and then put a rating on it after the people at Valve look at it. I think the community's getting much larger now that it's been out for so long and people like it so much, and the software's only going to keep growing because of how many people are actually using this device on a daily basis. Plus, it's Steam. It's been around forever, and now you've got basically Steam Mobile. So, game selection and software has only gotten better on the Steam Deck, but what else have they done to make this a better experience? Well, the Proton layer can run a ton of different applications. So if you want to play, say, Diablo 4, it can launch the Blizzard launcher and you can play any games you want to through that. So being able to use Steam as a front end to launch Proton turns out really well. But some things like Destiny or Xbox Game Pass actually turn out better as their streaming services, which you do get a lot more battery. So depending on what you want to play, you may want to still stream it. So let's move on from software and move over to the hardware side of things, where they have absolutely made so many different things for this device in a very short amount of time. Think about things like Game Boys and PSPs and stuff. They've been out for a long time and people are still making different things for them. Well, the Steam Deck's only been out for a short amount of time, and they're actually putting different things like a complete new hard shell, replacement sticks for your device if you get some sort of problem. All of the parts are matched with iFixit. You can buy and replace any of the parts that you break, which might happen. So let's dig into the hardware, see what's worth it and what's not. So there's a lot of different mods out there, and I thought I'd pick the few that were the most popular. And what those are the Steam Deck SSD upgrade, an extreme rate shell to do a shell swap, Gully Kit, electromagnetic joysticks. I also got a screen protector, which is funny later on, and I also ordered a second Steam Deck, and this is the lowest model Steam Deck, so everybody can kind of get a feel for what the lowest Steam Deck SKU will be like when you fully upgrade it. So let's go over each one of these mods and see how difficult they are and how much it's worth the payoff is to the end user. So starting off with, I'm going to give you a little scale here. We're going to say difficulties from 1 to 10. 0 is doing no mod. 1 would be installing an SD card, which you don't have to take the device apart at all. So that's kind of how I'm going to use the scale here. So replacing the joysticks. I think if something's wrong with your joysticks and they are broken, I think this Gully Kit joystick replacement is awesome. They are new sticks that drop right in, and it really is pretty easy to install these because there's not much in the way of pulling them out from the deck. You just have to remove some cables and it's no big deal. I would give this about a 3 in the hardness category because you do have to take apart the device, but it's not very hard. You're not going to have too much of a problem. You could pretty much get away with just a screwdriver for this one. And if your sticks are not broken, I don't really see a need to replace these. I would wait until they either get worn out or get grimy and then replace them. But is it necessary to replace these right off the bat? I don't think so. Next, I'm going to move over to the Sabrent Rocket. Now, I think this mod is the most important mod, especially if you're getting a 64 gigabyte model Steam Deck. This brings your internal storage all the way up to a terabyte, or however much you pay for. This is a huge difference because the SteamOS has been updated over the years now and takes up a bit of space now. So it's going to take up a majority of that 64 gigs with basically the operating system. So you're going to want to get an SD card, and I would recommend just replacing the NVMe drive pretty much right away. Then, instead of installing a bunch of games and having to uninstall them or sync anything over, you could just drop an ISO of Steam Deck on there and not care about what's on there. And Sabrent has a great set of videos, I will link in the description, about how to install the SSD in addition to how to wipe and reset your SSD. So I very much recommend using that whole product line to do this mod, and I would say this is probably a 5 out of 10 on the hard disk scale, but a 10 out of 10 for the worth it scale. I would definitely recommend doing this if you're a Steam Deck owner. Now we get to the shell swap. So the shell swap can come into, well, two different use cases here. If you're someone who is very interested in changing the look of your device to make it more your own, and have done stuff replacing screens or working with micro soldering or doing high-end fixes for electronics, this kit will be for you. This kit is definitely not for the person who just bought a Steam Deck and would also like to do a shell swap right off the bat and has no experience or tools to do this. I would say this shell swap is for an experienced user, and I would say it's a 9 or a 10 out of 10 on the hardness scale. Now, once you get it done, this thing looks freaking sweet. But, me being me, I'm not the greatest of artisans with my hands, and of course I cracked the screen on the one side. So, of course, I'm going to end up having to buy a new screen, or just live with it how it is, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing. This was not due to the fault of the Extreme Rate shell. This was me being a little impatient and not having the experience of pulling up a screen before. And this thing is really on there. It is a bunch of little pads that goes around the side, and I just on the one side just gave it a little too much pressure and just cracked the screen. This took me about 4.5 to 5 hours to completely redo the shell, and it's an intensive process. You're tearing down the entire device and building it back up from scratch. And when it's done, to be honest, I was able to get, sometimes you do shell swaps like a PSP shell swap, and it doesn't feel the same way as a normal device would. It feels like a little janky, and it doesn't, all the pieces don't fit right, and sometimes there's panel gaps and all that kind of stuff. Well, this one fits very well together, and they give you so many screws and button replacements, and the Steam Deck screen pads just line up perfectly. It's a fantastic kit, but be warned, it is not for the faint of heart. That being said, it is super freaking cool. So, things I've done to the Steam Deck that I think are worth it are absolutely do the Steam Deck SSD update. 64 gigs, the lowest end model, basically means you get no games on that. You could fit some very, very small, under a gig, maybe 2 gig games on the internal SSD when you get it, but 64 gigs is not enough. Steam has been updating, so it's going to be taking more space on the hard drive than it was at launch, so it's basically useless. You will need to use a micro SD card if you're getting the base model. As for the shell replacement, this looks awesome. It was tough. It was not easy and not something for the faint of heart. It will take you an afternoon, and Extreme Rate actually has a great video on how to do this and how to replace all the parts back together. But even with that, I was still a dingus and cracked my screen here. But I think it looks awesome. If you are someone who has taken a phone part before, or someone who is willing to pay the $65 if you screw up the screen, if you know that cost going in, I think this mod is awesome. But if you're not an expert, you're going to want to go with something like a backplate replacement if you want to change the look a little bit and kind of make it your own, but without having the hassle. Replacing the backplate Does not take long at all. It takes about 15 minutes. And that's if you have no idea what you're doing. It takes about 4 seconds. Just pop it off, do the screws, and pop it back on. There's nothing that the back plate really needs other than replacing the button. So if you want to mod it and you want to dip your toes in, I think replacing the back plate is a great way to start. So I think from a modding standpoint and if you should do it standpoint for this, I would say if you're willing and confident to do it and you've taken apart a device like this before, and you have things like a heat gun, something to pry the screen up with that isn't a tiny little doodad, I think this would be a lot easier to do. However, if you don't have anything like that, I would highly recommend doing the backplate first and seeing if that gets you to where you need visually. The clear Steam Deck, though, is pretty sweet. Everybody likes it. It's really cool to see all the inner parts and workings of your device while you're playing on it. Because, let's face it, everybody likes handhelds. And everybody likes the devices as much as they like the games that they're playing on the devices. So, if you're in the market for a different device, check out one of these other videos because I have tons of devices and like them too much. I've spent far too much money on these, and, well, pickles aren't going to buy themselves. So I need to keep making money doing this, apparently. Like these. Or, maybe you want to go old school and buy something like this. Handheld computing devices and different ways to play games on the go are awesome. So check out these videos and subscribe down below.